Hello, everyone, and welcome to Painless Universal, a conversation with myself and Welsh. Thank you so much for joining us on this Painless Universal conversation. For those of you who are new, check out our channel on YouTube, Painless Universal. We share inspirational stories from various people. Today, our focus is talking to Davinia Taylor. She's such an inspirational woman. She even starred in Hollyoaks, a Channel 5 soap opera. But what inspires me about Davina Taylor is her conversation about ADHD and how we can overcome this pain as adults. Most of you might not know that even adults themselves go through these challenges. What is ADHD? It's a condition associated with trouble paying attention and controlling impulsive behavior. She thinks this might have led from her back days when she was prompted of being, really into her boozing and drug addiction, because that might have led to the ADHD. But what's really fascinating about her is her journey. She went through these challenges and she's now sober-free for 10 years. And not just that, she talks about her journey about losing weight, her own struggles with her child, dealing with custody battles, and how she's found joy in all her challenges to be the wonderful woman she is today. So rather than we going through the whole book chapter of how do we get into a better way of recovery, she'll be sharing her own journey with us. Meet Davina Taylor as she shares her inspirational story. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Painless Universal, a conversation with myself and Welsh. As we said in an introduction, I have really fascinating, amazing Davina Taylor here with us today. Davina, how are you?
I'm good at the moment, just ticking the boxes and just waiting for the next crisis to happen in our house. We've got a busy house, I've got 3 boys living with me, and then I've got my eldest. I share custody with my ex-husband, and he sort of like we do a week on, week off. So he's coming back on Friday, and all hell will break loose as the dynamics change and the power struggle kicks in. And I'm feeling pretty robust at the moment. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. I think everyone is feeling this, but how are you dealing with lockdown with managing a routine? I think so many people want to know that before I even dig into the interview, anything else.
Sure. I think a lot of my problems have stemmed from me not having a routine in my life. And now I have children. I think that can save so many people who've had ad hoc careers or strangely enough, I was talking to a guy who's in sort of showbiz, and we're all very sort of like drifting between jobs and everything. And this is why I think things like drinking and insecurities and addictions are so prevalent in the showbiz world. It's because we don't necessarily have that 9-to-5 routine, not just the security, the routine, the purpose every day. And that's when, and so many people have kind of like said to me, oh my God, I see what you mean. It's like all this sort of free time and no structure, no sort of like, okay, now I have my cup of tea at 11 and now I go into the office and I have this meeting and then we have the accounts. And that's just gone. And people find it really discombobulating because you have to rely on yourself to monitor your own strength, to stay away from temptation, to stay away from a bottle of wine, to stay away from a chocolate biscuit, and it's really difficult without structure. And that's why I think the kids are suffering as well, because this routine is so paramount to our own security and our own, the structure of our day needs to be solid, because unless you're really strong and self-disciplined, which so many of us aren't, you can go wayward so quickly.
I totally agree, because I am going through that thing, but I think my discipline came from my health issues, and I was forced to discipline myself, even though I'm in a kind of showbiz line of work where you're in and out, but I had to force myself from being ill. I remember having to pack my bag for hospital, and the doctor said, what do you mean you have to pack your bag? Don't you have your bag already prepared in case you might go into hospital? I'm like, oh, do they do that? And that forced me to always have a routine and always be disciplined, because I would never know when I'll be sick. So I always had to prepare for tomorrow. And this is one of the reasons I do this, because I always want to know other people's way of how they overcome their challenges of whatever life throws at them. I think one of the fascinating thing about you, Davina, is that your life had so much ups and downs, but look at you now. No one will believe that you went through those phases of life, and look at you now. But before we dig into all of that, can you just tell us a little bit about who is Davina?
Okay. First of all, I don't really see myself as an actor anymore. I see myself as, I mean, my first job is a mother. You know, they are the priority. They're the emails that I focus on, and anything else that I do is almost like a luxury. So talking to you about this and helping people on Instagram, for me, is a pleasure. I just need to get that straight. My job is a mum, and maybe one day that role will change, but that's my priority. I started off as a young girl, an only child, and I always wanted to be in the showbiz industry, and I didn't really know why, because none of my family are from that side of the world. But I was kind of held back by my parents because they wanted me to go down the academic route, which I think played into my low self-esteem as a performer as I moved into the acting world. You know, I think if one of my children, which none of them have incidentally, which is a shame, if any of them showed sort of a flair or a talent or a passion for the stage, I definitely get them classically trained at a young age and just show them, you know, because it is a science, and you do need that inner confidence to take you through auditions and to battle through and to understand that it is an industry and it's not a hobby. So I did train, and then I eventually got a job on a Channel 4 soap, Hollyoaks, and that was fantastic. And it was more like learning on the job, and it was basically, you know, you threw a load of like student age kids together and gave them a paycheck and just watched the fireworks. So of course there's a few casualties, and a few of us have survived it, and you know, there's a lot of recovery in the acting world anyway. But I love actors, and I love being around crew, and I love being around, you know, even the guys who are doing all the electrics, the sparks and everything. There is always that camaraderie on set that I love, and I think it's because I was an only child, and I had a deep loneliness and a boredom within my childhood, that I think made me bolt as soon as I could and look for the bright lights, look for the action, look for the camaraderie, and look for that family, you know. Yeah. So that's why the acting world is so wonderful, because it's full of the weird and the strange and the stories and the entertainment, and I loved it. So that was when I started my first professional life. And then soon after that, I moved to London and gravitated again just to the bright lights, the fast life, the fast pace of life. Load of partying was involved, and got married, got divorced, had terrible postnatal depression, and turned to alcohol, because that was always my go-to anyway for any sort of neuro sort of discomfort. It was always alcohol. And since doing all this sort of research, basically, after becoming a mother, going into genetics and looking at my DNA, looking at my epigenetics, and looking at my neuro sort of chemistry, I've kind of discovered all sorts of reasons why I was predisposed to link to alcohol and nothing else. Not gambling, not sex, not drugs. It was alcohol was my go-to. And I think it actually saved my life in one respect, because I was so depressed, but in another it came with a huge heap of implications, and it had to go in the end. But you know, I don't demonize alcohol, because it is a stress relief, but for me, I have an addictive gene, and it grabbed onto it and ran with it. And I'm here to sort of tell the tale. And I think there's a lot of shame around alcohol, there's a lot of shame around overeating, and to be honest, it's a science. And we need to understand that there's a chemistry going on within each of us that is having this negative effect on us. And it's a fascinating subject to get into. And for me, it's just a hobby, and I put it out on Instagram, and I'm writing a book about it, that, you know, it's an emerging science that we need to corner, because so many of us are trapped in addictive behaviors, and it's killing us, and we are passing those behaviors on to our children. and I want to make it stop with me, you know. I don't want my kids to go through that. So I'm like a lunatic watching them behave, but you know, it's still interesting.
But you talk about being the only child. How did that affect you growing up? Because obviously your father was a, you know, very successful what he did. How did that affect you? Did he want you to follow in his footsteps?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, of course.
take over the business because it was just you? Because I remember when I had just my son, I was always panicking. I didn't like that at all. I always thought, oh my gosh, he's going to be lonely, even though he has cousin, he has all that. But I think there's just nothing like the bond of a sibling. How did that? How did your family growing up deal with that? And would your father say to you and ever say to you, "Oh my goodness, I would love you to take over the business one day," rather than going to showbiz? Or did they just let?
Yeah, that was the underlying message, and it wasn't just my dad who was a business person; it was my mother as well. So they were married very young at 18. They're both from the same council estate in Liverpool, and they built this company together. But it's the press always picks up on my dad. Strangely enough, my mother passed away today, 5 years ago, and I didn't even. I try and block dates out of my head. It's weird you mentioned like my family, and I'm like, oh God, it's ironic that I'm doing this podcast, and it's today that I lost her, you know. But we'll get onto that soon. But anyway, so basically, my parents were both sort of very innovative, very driven, very motivated to get out of the financial situation they were raised in. Both from great families, huge families. And in my opinion, they're very dopamine driven parents. You know, they have a very strong dopamine drive. And I think I inherited that. But to be as lucky as them, to be setting up businesses in the 80s with the government grants and with the market as it was, I mean, it's 1 in a billion. They understand they're lucky. They worked hard as well and were super creative and just, you know, went knocking on door to door to sell products, etc. My mum was a hairdresser by trade, and my dad was a sales rep. And basically, together they built a paper industry. But for me, I was always in that shadow. So maybe that's why I sort of thought I'd try my hand at something completely incomparable to manufacturing, and I'll go into acting. I don't know. But not having a sibling to share that burden might have been softer for me. But my mum actually got breast cancer when I was 3, and the doctor advised she couldn't have any more children because of, you know, just in case it kicked off the cancer again. So it wasn't an option really for them. And I know it broke my mum's heart. She would have liked to have had lots of children. And yeah, I did find I put a lot of emphasis on my friends. You know, there was a lot of almost codependency with other families. I always wanted to be with other families and spend less time at home because I was, you know, there weren't computer games back then. And, you know, and we lived in a little sort of farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. That, you know, there was no passing traffic or anything. I'd just stare out the window at the odd sheep. And, it, you know, it's like being in solitary. And for someone like me, who, like my parents, dopamine driven, needs interaction, needs to burn energy, it was a little bit like torture, albeit I was brought up securely and safely, no trauma whatsoever. But maybe that's what triggered me to go out there and, you know, max out on other sources of dopamine. I don't know. You just don't know. There's so many sort of like epigenetic triggers that could just trickle down and just make me who I am today. But it's nice to see it that there's a science there now and I can track it, and there's no blame, and there's, you know, there's my grandparents' history that comes down in my genetics, and, you know, there's trauma from 5 generations that can be registered with me through epigenetics. And it's fascinating because it takes the blame away and you just go, okay, this is my lot, let's work with it, let's navigate it, and let's use it to my own potential, really.
So, but how did the alcohol get in? How did you start on that path of the alcohol?
Okay. Well, I mean, I never set out to become an alcoholic.
No.
I don't, and I don't think anybody does, and it picks and chooses, you know, and it depends on, because like I said, there's no trauma in my family, so you wouldn't earmark me as someone who should, you know. Maybe it was the lack of routine in my life, but maybe it was a lack of self-esteem. But also with my predisposition in my genes, I can detox alcohol really quickly so I don't get sick from it. So I'm able to consume a lot of it. And I have like a sort of an addictive predisposition to dopamine. So the alcohol will give me dopamine, which is that happy hormone, a happy buzz. And combine that with an ability to detox it, you've got a perfect storm. So if I feel depressed, which I did do after having a child because it was IVF, all my hormones hit the floor, that one glass of wine could turn into two. And before you know it, it's got out of hand because there is nothing on the market to help you. And no doctor who's given you IVF is going to tell you you're more likely to get postnatal depression. They'll just send you on the way with a nice check in their back pocket. So there's a lot of protection that isn't there that could be there for women. And I mean, I had to stumble upon all this, and I'm lucky to survive, you know. It really does take women to suicide. And because it's combined with shame and guilt, all the worst emotions that a person can carry, and also a responsibility for a child that you think you're not good enough for. I remember changing Gray's nappy, shaking with adrenaline because I thought I'm doing it wrong. Not that I was going to hurt him, not that I was going to do anything violent. I just thought, I can't do this right. No one had taught me. No one had taught me that this complete lack of hormones was due to the messing around with IVF being pumped into me for months on end. No, and they just send you on your way with this new baby. And just like, you know, they check in with you. Oh, you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. You're not. I don't even have a blood test to check my hormone levels. It is archaic. And there's a science there to help women, and they just don't utilize it. I just find it baffling.
And I think this is why you're here. I think this is why you are here to share that journey and help other women who are going to go through, you know, so many women, especially now with lockdown. Who knows what's happening to so many women right now with lockdown, you know, dealing with all kinds of, you know, anxiety, depression, being at home. Who knows what's happening? So I think your story really really hits a lot of women right now.
And also, I mean, I've been just in lockdown, I've been stumbling across. I mean, I think I've definitely got some sort of ADD, like it's an attention deficit disorder, like ADHD. A lot of boys get diagnosed with that. Girls get completely undiagnosed, by the way. This is a boys thing. And it's not. Girls get it too. But it manifests differently in girls. So if you have a little girl who is, you know, like a dolly daydream, you know how teachers used to call you, oh, she's a bit ditzy. Yeah. She's always, you know, she's always daydreaming. It could be a form of ADHD, and it's just going undiagnosed. If she gets called lazy, if she struggles with peers, you know, all these things get completely undiagnosed. The boys get the attention, but the girls don't, which is, I mean, I didn't know that because I've only got boys, you know? So it was only when I was looking at one of my children and looking through these lists, and this happens to so many women, they go, I can relate to this list. Why was this never picked up with me as a child? And only now it's coming to light that women who have been living with ADHD just manage to navigate through life. They're only finding out they've had it for life when their children get diagnosed, because it is genetic as well. Now, this leads me back into the alcohol as well, because so many women have to self-medicate to bring focus to get on with their day. And often that's hacking into your hormones again. Once again, dopamine, that drive hormone, is it's switched on so often with that glass of wine. Wow. And before you know it, boom. And unfortunately, with the glass of wine, you get drunk. So you can't keep topping up on your medication without, you know, the trade-off of being bloody drunk in charge of a child. So, you know, I mean, you're in a catch-22, but you're not necessarily drinking wine to get drunk and party. You're drinking wine to focus and get some clarity in your brain and to boost your own self-esteem, because at the moment you've got this neurodiversity that's different to the woman next to you or the chap next to you. And women with ADD or ADHD often miss appointments accidentally, feel overwhelmed, often people pleasers, chronic people pleasers, you know. And that is so many women today just say to me, God, that's me. I have all intentions of, you know, making that appointment, replying to that email, but it's just gone. It's disappeared out my brain because something else has come over. And it's not through being lazy, because you're often spinning many plates. It's literally your neuro pathways are slightly different. And often as well, you can have this you can be a little bit erratic, take more risks, you know, you can take far more risks, like choose the wrong guy, I guess, get into the wrong car, have that extra glass of wine. And you can't fast forward as well. So that's something I've had to learn to do, is fast forward, particularly around alcohol, and get out of the moment that I'm in now and fast forward 15 minutes and sort of place myself in the future and how I'd feel. Wow. And I do that with nutrition as well, because if I don't eat right, I can feel my mood coming down. And if I'm in a low mood, I know that glass of wine is like shouting to me, screaming to me subliminally, no, come and take the medication. Yeah. It is always there till the day I die, or till they find a cure. But I don't hold up much hope for that.
How did that lead to your custody for the, you know, when you had the first marriage? How did that lead to the custody battle? And
well, I mean, of course, I had to go into treatment, and by going into treatment, I had to hand over custody, which is not very nice for women, really. You know, of course, I don't want to hand over custody. Well, they said, well, you can't go to treatment then. I'm like, okay, so that's just not going to work for me. So I had to put my life first, because I knew I had a problem at this point. I'd gone through all the denial, but at this point I knew I had a problem, and I had to sign over custody and then fight for 5 years to get it back. And that's the nature of the family court. I mean, I can't talk too much about it because I could end up in prison. And that is true with most women. They have to sign gagging orders, so we can't communicate. And I think the family court is probably one of the most vicious arenas I've ever seen. Far, particularly when it comes to sexism. And when I speak to other mums at schools, they're all under gagging orders, but we still talk at the school gates, and the horror stories and the injustice. And it is phenomenal. It's literally like living in the dark ages on a witch hunt. And, you know, it's something I'd really love to out at one point, you know, but I've got to protect myself. And the last thing my kids need is me in prison because I've opened my big mouth again. No. That'll be my ADD, won't it? Just blurting out.
No, it's not even worth it. I think you've gone past that stage, because that brings us to the beautiful part of your life about the, you know, getting healthy and recovering. What was that aha moment in your life that really got you? You know, you've gone through all this thing in your life. All of a sudden, aha moment, something pops in, and you said, enough. I need to check.
It was, I think I've been to the doctor and I was borderline obesity, and, you know, and I was quite shocked at that, because again, overeating is very much sat in the denial part of your brain. And I'd lost my mum, and obviously I can't turn to wine. I don't smoke. I wasn't drinking coffee at that point. There was nothing there for me. So I reached out for my old friend, the carbohydrate and the sugar, and and I really piled it on, and I didn't even realize I was piling it on, and I didn't realize how inflamed I was. And the inflammation in my body wasn't just hurting my knees, my joints, it was in my brain. And it was at a point where I was just laying in bed, and I just thought, obviously the doctor told me to take daily exercise, and I was struggling to get to the loo motivation wise. I was like, oh God, have I got to go to the loo? And I'm there, I'm watching This Morning, and then I'm watching Loo Swimming, and I'm just like sat in bed. I've had the baby's more than big enough, you know, there was no reason for me to be so big. I finished breastfeeding, etc. And everything they were telling me, the foods that they were telling me to have, the whole grains, the polyunsaturated fats, the little and often, the moderation. I'm an addict. Moderation isn't in my vocabulary, and it doesn't work for so many of us. Anyway, I came across a guy called Wim Hof. Now, he is incredibly mad, but he's fabulous. Now, his wife, she committed suicide many years ago, leaving 4 children because of depression. So the story sort of resonated with me. I thought, okay, I'm clearly depressed. I don't want to go back on antidepressants, because they don't work. They just make you flatline. And I still reach for the cookies and cakes, etc. Anyway, he started talking about cold water exposure. And I was like, okay, right. Now this is coming from me, who I love injections and pills and everything. So anything natural for me is just too woo-woo and won't work. Anyway, he has scientific papers to back all this cold exposure and how it balances your hormones. Now, remember, I know I'm driven by my hormones. Most women are driven by the hormones. We know what PMT is like. We know what perimenopause is like. We know what the menopause did to our mothers. We know hormones are bloody rocket fuel if you can tap into them. And so I started reading and I started looking at these papers and I started doing cold exposure, just a few seconds a day. And that for me sort of switched my self-esteem, because I was getting out my bed, I was having a hot shower, and then I was just 30 seconds on cold, and something switched in me. There's something more out there than what I was reading, what I was getting in Glamour magazine, what I was getting in Cosmo, what I was reading on the Mail Online. It wasn't working. And then I uncovered all this secret industry called biohacking. I started changing my fats. I started putting butter and oil into my caffeine. I started taking L-theanine with caffeine so I didn't get the jitters. And I just had cool, sustained energy. I mean, there's just a whole world out there that you can hack into your own biology without having to go down the medical route. And it is basically so simple and so cheap and so implementable. And it worked for me. And I must say, I just can't stop talking about it because the science is there. It's pretty fun. It's almost instantaneous. And, you know, I've ran 2 marathons. I couldn't get out of bed. You know, I thought my knees hurted. I had water retention all around my chest. You know, I was bloated. My ankles were, my feet were fat. I mean, what's that going to do with anything? I was like a walking bruise. And once I realized what I was doing wrong and I turned my diet on its head, things started to click. But most of all, I fed my brain. I fed my brain good fat. I fed my brain fuel. I fed my brain nootropics that work for it. And my body just came. And it works. It works. I run 5-10K every day without even thinking about it. Nice. And I could not even... I was that person at Sainsbury's who had to be closer to the disabled parking so I didn't have to walk that far.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe that. Because you said exercise improves your mental health and depression. How? What did
you... Okay, so I mean, that once again, it's hormones. Also, exercising outside is pretty good as well. The natural daylight. Okay, I never wear sunglasses ever. We need blue light. I never wear SPF. We need that sunlight. It registers on our skin. It synthesizes vitamin D, which we've all heard about, which of course, since COVID, you know, it's all about the immunity. So I never wear sunglasses, SPF. I get as much sunlight onto my skin as possible. So if I'm running, I'll take my top off. And as soon as I get warm enough, and I'll try, even in the winter, I'll try and get my skin in this dreary Lancashire weather. I'll try and get those UV rays on my skin to synthesize the sun's energy. And for me, exercise, now I can do it. I see the reason for it. It literally aligns my thinking. It's like a form of meditation. I listen to my favorite music. I used to listen to podcasts when I could only walk. Remember, I could only walk. And then I started doing a walk for the verse and a jog for the chorus. And then eventually I managed to do Hyde Park. But I never used to be able to, I couldn't do it, you know, but your body is born to run. It will adapt, no matter if you've got massive boobs. I had huge boobs, you know, huge sports bra, everything. But, and by the way, no one cares about anybody else in the park or anyone else. They're so focused on their own exercise that they don't care, you know. And often women think, oh, what are they going to think of me? Trust me, if anyone's running, the last thing they're thinking is about you. They're thinking, give me oxygen. But what happens is maybe it's a deep breathing. You get more nitric oxide, which powers the brain. Maybe it's the endorphins that come with the pounding. Maybe it's the music I have on, like the binaural beats, boom, boom, boom. I listen to 90s house music because I'm literally stuck in a time warp. I know it's sad and my kids just roll their eyes, but that was some of the happiest days of my life. But I mean, like the other day, I had an 80s soundtrack on. I was listening to Huey Lewis in the News, you know, and it just took me back to junior disco. So you get all this euphoric recall, you're deep breathing, you're balancing your hormones, you're getting your serotonin working, you're activating your guts, you're activating your digestive system, because sometimes you'll need the toilet when you're out jogging, just go. And I mean, the amount of chemical reactions are going on when you're exercising and you're getting your heart rate up. are phenomenal, and no pill or no doctor, no scientist can match that yet. I'm sure we will, but right now nature's had evolved for the past millennia and they've got it right. So even if you can't just get into the shower, start with your hormones, turn the cold water on, see what happens to you. Do it for 5 days. If nothing works, what have you lost? Nothing. Not even a hot water bill.
That was what I was going to ask you, actually. You know, the thing with women I find is that we want to achieve something. We want to be better. We want to be the slim. We want to lose weight. We want our mental health stable. But one thing I find with women is that we find it absolutely difficult to set achievable goals. We just can't. In your opinion, what's the best way for a woman struggling right now to find her own goal and set those things that are really achievable? Because some people might just say, I just can't do it. What would you?
Okay. First of all, I'd start listening. I mean, I find it difficult because I've got like some sort of attention disorder, which I'm yet to be diagnosed with. I mean, I probably won't even go down that route because I've hacked my way out of it. I find podcasts really easy. So the way I started, I'd listen to a podcast, I'd listen to something that's educational, and I was listening to biohacking podcasts, and there's tons out there for biohacking women, and you begin to learn your science of your own body. And I'd sit in a bath for 20 minutes, a hot bath with magnesium. By the way, we're all magnesium depleted. The planet is. And sometimes if you take too much magnesium, it might be funny on your tummy. So don't forget, your skin is the biggest organ in the body and it will absorb and suck up that magnesium. So take all the perfumes out your bathroom, by the way, because that's just putting burden on your liver. I don't wear perfume anymore at all. Unless, let's say, if I was going out, I'd spray it in my hair. That's just a little hack that you'll learn along the way. These things all end up in your liver. So sit in your bath, tip a load of Epsom salts in there, which is magnesium, and sweat. And listen to your podcast till it's almost unbearable, till your brain is pumping. You know, when you can feel the blood flowing in your head after a hot bath. Yeah. And get in that cold shower and just breathe out for 4 seconds, breathe in for 2. And hum, because it activates the vagus nerve. It sounds crazy. It sounds like I'm some sort of woo-woo lunatic. But it's scientific fact. Your doctor won't tell you this yet. In 10 years' time, he will do. But if you concentrate the cold water shower on the back of your neck, you're activating your vagus nerve, which activates your digestive system, which activates your hormones, your gut as well. And guess what's made in your gut? Serotonin. That's the happy hormone. Straight up to your brain. Before you know it, you're calm. And do not worry about having a cold shower before you go to bed, because your body will balance itself. And your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your calming nervous system, will kick in and you'll have the sleep of an Egyptian pharaoh. It will be blissful. And that, to me, is doable. And that is your first step. And you do that for a month and see what happens. It's only a bath, it's only a cold shower, and it's only Epsom salts. But it could change the trajectory of your day the next day. And who knows what might happen then.
What about the eating bit? You also changed your eating habits. How did you?
I mean, I've changed them really dramatically. No? But what I'd recommend for people to look out for, which are depressive, are vegetable oils. So your sunflower oil, which will increase hunger, by the way. It's put in that product to make you eat more. Same with sugar. Familiarize yourself with anything with O's at the end, like dextrose, fructose. That's a hidden sugar. Even coconut sugar is sugar. So just be aware that if you're buying a health product, you're probably paying premium and you're probably paying for inflammatory products as well that have been chucked in there just to make you eat them more. If you can cut out as much vegetable oil and sugar as you can, and when you do have sugar, make sure it's got some benefit to it. So for example, raw honey. So if you're going to have something sweet, have raw honey, or better still, change it to stevia. It won't spike your insulin level. However, if you can't resist having sugar, have a shot of apple cider vinegar beforehand and it'll level your insulin. So you won't get that peak of insulin as your liver goes through chaos trying to deal with the sugar. And then you don't get that drop at the end 2 hours later when you're reaching for more crisps, etc. So maybe a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in a glass of water, neck it down, and then have something to eat. And if you've got serious gut problems and everything, try getting some activated charcoal. You can get all this at Holland & Barrett, and they're super cheap. In fact, Aldi have got apple cider vinegar for £1.75 at the moment, and it's a big bottle, and I use it every day.
You see, that's it. You know, our final question is all about consistency. You said you've been alcohol free for 13 years. I'm like absolutely shocked. I've seen so many people start and stop, start and stop. How have you managed to stay consistent in not being alcohol free? What did you do?
Okay, well, I mean, a lot of people stay with AA and then they stay sober through AA. I think that provides accountability, camaraderie, and you work at, like I said at the beginning of this chat, you have a routine, you have to work through the 12 steps. That wasn't really for me. I've never leave AA. If anybody wanted me to talk in AA, I would do, but I'm not following the 12-step program. I think it's a great organization. Some of the funniest people on the planet are in those rooms, and you hear such funny stories. But for me, it's all about my brain health. The book stops with me. The journey's mine. The traumas that I put myself through are mine. Then, you know, and I find if I want to trigger myself, I will eat addictive foods, and that will eventually take me back to my number one demon, which is alcohol. And if I don't exercise, if I don't eat correctly, if I don't do things like Wim Hof, which if anybody does anything today, just download his app and try doing some of his deep breathing. It changes the chemistry in your body. It alkalizes your body. And basically, I just need to know myself and what brings my mood down, that's going to make me reach for that Pinot Grigio, or make me think for some crazy reason life's better with alcohol. And that, again, is years of training myself to fast forward. Just what will happen? I'll be back in that court fighting for custody. I'll lose my house. I'll lose my integrity. I'll lose my children. You know, I'll lose my dogs. You know, I mean, it's not just one glass of wine with me, because I know, I've seen my genetics. I have an addictive predisposition, and there ain't no getting away from that.
Wow. No, absolutely. I'm so glad you shared this wonderful story with me, because I think not just women, I think men as well, they go through this challenging ADHD, right?
HD, yeah.
I think so many adults are going through it, and we all think it's just kids. The kids are suffering, especially
because I tell you what I did. I wrote down because I knew I'd forget it. But you can actually check yourself. There is a website where you can check yourself. There's an online Psych Central ADHD quiz, and you could do it yourself and take a look and just finally figure out if you are or you're not. And I'd also say for anybody with ADHD, you really need to supplement with krill oil. That is the brain's preferred food. And particularly if you get SAD, the Scandinavians naturally, of course, Northern Hemisphere, they have very, very long winter nights, you know. The reason why they didn't get depressed was because of the amount of oily fish they have. It's paramount for people with depression to get that brain food. I mean, the vegan movement and everything, I think, is going to be responsible for some chronic depressive episodes. I understand what they're trying to do and everything, yes. But I think we're going to hit an epidemic of disproportionate results because of people cutting out really good fats. You know, you really need to focus on good animal fats. And I mean, there's some incredible studies with krill oil, but definitely, I mean, I have salmon 3 times a week, and I have mackerel pate, just those little mackerels that you get in the supermarket, just whiz it up with some cream on some sourdough, boom, down. I've just, you know, but my kids all take it because I'm watching them like a hawk, you know. So it's paramount. You got to protect your brain, because all movement begins in the brain, you know. You do not pick up a glass of wine or put on your pair of trainers without making that decision in your brain. If your brain is not in a safe place, your body won't be.
Wow. Oh no, absolutely. I'm really glad you took the time out to tell us your journey and ways we could help ourselves, especially during lockdown now. So many people being trapped at home, not knowing what to do, and just the basic few steps. I will try the cold shower. I've never done it myself. I'll give it a go and I'll tell you how it goes. I'm dreading it. I'm so scared. I'm not a cold water girl.
None of us are, but your ancestors were. And so trust me, it's in your genes. Your body will remember, it'll know what to do, and it will adapt accordingly.
Wow. Davina, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate talking to you today. Thank you.
Anytime.